Hello, my name's Thomas Hedlund. I've been a marriage family therapist in California for over 42 years. And on this new YouTube channel, I'm going to be sharing information that I found has been most helpful with my clients in achieving greater function, whether it be in their intimate relationships, their personal lives, or in their recovery from addiction. So if you happen to like what you see here, please feel free to like it and subscribe. There will be future videos coming down. And also, feel free to share it with your friends. I want to try and get the word out. This information is not generally available unless you pick up the right books. So, where I want to start with this with you is kind of a different notion that most people would rather believe their partner's depriving them in a relationship than realize that they're trapped too. The real truth, when you examine things carefully, is that individuals and couples are actually in a struggle with their own limitations in the relationship. So the way we improve our function is by changing our limitations and acquire new skills. So today I'm going to talk about self-mastery and intimacy in a way that hopefully will help you understand a little bit what goes on if you can slow the videotape down and actually see what's happening in your relationship. What normally happens for people is that they get triggered and they start reacting at some point to what they think their partner is saying. And as you probably well know, after a long time in a relationship, these interactions are very highly choreographed and they take place without any conscious thought. So what I want to share with you is a way that you can learn to manage your reactivity. What happens with most individuals, human beings, is that when we get triggered or we perceive a threat, a real or imagined one, what happens is we go into a fight, flight, freeze reaction. What that looks like in human beings is if we're going to fight, we're going to try and dominate and control the interaction to eliminate the threat. Flight is physically or emotionally, I'm going to withdraw. And freeze is I'm going to be passive or compliance and give up myself in order to avoid the conflict. None of these skills or tools, they're perfectly appropriate when your life is at stake, but they're not the kinds of skills that are going to build intimacy and safety and optimal function in your personal relationship. So the first thing we have to do is learn how to self-soothe. We need to learn how to regulate and manage our emotions so that we can click back in and engage our thinking brain. What happens when we get triggered into our fight, flight, freeze is basically our thinking brain goes offline and we're emotionally reacting or we're thinking emotionally. In later videos, I may go into more detail on it, but basically what the very first thing we need to do is learn how to self-soothe or calm our fears. Much like if you were just soothing or calming a frightened child. And as we learn to regulate our emotions, it's called affect regulation. So we learn to regulate our emotions and soothe ourselves. We calm ourselves down, we can restore our thinking capabilities, and we can see the big picture rather than reacting to what we think is happening, usually based on past interactions. When we think about what we can do differently as we regulate our emotions and see the big picture in the relationship, then we can begin to make more deliberate and conscious choices about what we want to do in our interactions. And I'll try and give you an example of how that works. But basically, after we've reached the point of regulating our emotions, calming ourselves down, even if that might involve a timeout, one of the stories I like to tell when I'm working with audiences is that I like to ask the question, how many of you, when you were a child, had parents who, when you said or did something, said this to you: "Oh my gosh, I am making myself so upset about what you said or did that I'm going to give myself a timeout and I'm going to calm myself down and then I'll come back and I'll talk to you with the kind of love and respect and compassion and curiosity that you deserve." Well, I've done this with thousands of people so far, and I haven't seen a hand go up in the audience yet. So we never had this modeled. We never had affect regulation. We developed this faulty idea that somehow our behavior was causing emotions in other people, and their behavior was causing emotions in us. That's really not what happens when you start to really play it back and see it more carefully in terms of a step-by-step process of what's going on. So we need to learn how to calm and soothe ourselves. That may involve a timeout if it's appropriate, until we're stabilized emotionally, and we come back and we can ask more questions in the relationship. What that might look like is, after I decided what do I know about you, what I know about myself in this situation, what are my triggers, where are my vulnerabilities, then I can own those, and I can turn to you with curiosity and ask you questions about what you said. So rather than reacting to what I think you said based on my past history, I'm actually able to ask questions and make sure I understand exactly what you're saying. Now, this is where it becomes an advanced communication skill, because what can happen is I might say, wow, I didn't know you felt that way about me. That's kind of hard to hear. Can you tell me more about what you don't like when I do that? And when you answer me and I get triggered again, I need to fall back, calm and soothe myself, and then ask another question. When I can do that successfully, you can imagine for yourself what happens if your partner, instead of reacting to what you've said, ask you more questions. All of a sudden you feel more loved, more cared for, that there's more concern about you in the relationship. And so what that looks like when you really achieve this kind of self-mastery is you can sometimes take a direct hit, something that really otherwise would seem like an insult or a threat to your relationship, and you could come back with another loving, compassionate question. And I'm not talking about out of sarcasm. I'm talking about out of sincerity and integrity and compassion. So when we can do this, we start to acquire the skill. Our partner feels more loved, more cared for. We actually feel more loving in the relationship rather than so defensive. Again, the problem almost always is for people become too defensive. So as we acquire this, we start to develop better emotional boundaries. So let me just talk real quickly about boundaries. When you have healthy boundaries, it's like a circle with the knob on the inside, or a door with the door with the knob on the inside. So I control what I see, what I think, what I hear, and I own how I feel. What I tell couples when I'm working with them in the very first session is, I want you to take 100% of your 50% of the interactions in the relationship, 100% of your 50%. When you can have healthy boundaries, you develop feelings of self-trust, competence, security, safety. You feel, protected without becoming defensive. And you're able to just kind of monitor and regulate your own emotions. This locus of control is inside of you instead of outside of you. When we were children, the locus of control was always outside of us. So as adults, we want to turn that back in on ourselves and manage our emotions and have that locus of power and control within. If you have weak boundaries, which most people tend to have when they come into therapy, it's like having a door with a knob on the outside. And what happens is it generates feelings of mistrust, insecurity, fear, uncertainty, and more vulnerability. So the whole idea is to be able to turn that locus of control and source of power to inside of you rather than outside of you. And I want to go over just briefly with you kind of, eight rules for personal growth that I acquired from David Snarch's work, one of the more creative thinkers in the field of marriage family therapy. So here's David's rules for personal growth. Confront yourself for the sake of your own integrity and personal development. That's number one. Number two is don't count on your partner confronting him or herself. That's their business, not yours. Number three, this is a big one. Stop taking your partner's reactions personally. This is one of the best things you can possibly do for yourself. It's also one of Miguel Ruiz's 4 agreements. Don't take anything personal. Whatever they're doing, it's more about them than it is about you. It's part of their story, not yours. The next one is one of the biggest ones of all where people really get trapped. It's don't identify with your feelings. What happens, and David is so genius about this, he says, the problem is not that you're not entitled to your feelings. The problem is that most people are defending the feelings they're trying to get rid of. And so they get stuck in them. So the idea is feel the feelings and then develop the skills you need so that you don't have to feel that way anymore. That's your job, not your partner's job. The next one, number 5, is stop trying to change your partner. That's none of your business. I can honestly tell you, I spent considerable time as a marriage counselor in couples counseling myself, where my underlying agenda was if I could just get her to change the way she does things, I'd be better off. It never worked. The next one is stop trying to make your partner listen, accept, or validate you. A lot of the models of communication really focus on, making your partner a better listener or becoming a better listener. What happens is a child needs that from a parent. A child, if they share something with a parent and the child, the parent can't receive it and respond appropriately, the child's sunk. They don't have any other skills to fall back on. They're utterly dependent on the parent. Whereas, as David Snarch says, I think very accurately, adults ought to be able to do better than that. We ought to be able to fall back on ourselves rather than expect something from our partner they may not be able to provide, especially in intense conflict. Now, and the next one is forget about working on the relationship and start working on yourself. What you can do is you can change your functions. You can change the way that things affect you, and you can change the way that you behave as a result from that. So you want to focus. The 8th one, the last one, is focus on yourself and what your partner is or isn't doing. For today, I think I'm going to stop right there. And what I'm going to do is in future videos, I'll go into a little bit of the brain science behind this and kind of what the consequences are when we are not able to manage our reactivity, because believe me, they're unattractive consequences, and they're the very things that you don't want to have happen in your relationship. Thanks for listening.